Um, Welcome to this virtual artist roundtable. Here we have many of the artists who are part of the Deepfake exhibition currently on view at Super Collider Gallery in Los Angeles. My name is Julia Buntinghoel. I'm the director of SciArt, and I'm so glad that you could all be here today with us, both artists and audience members. So the real goal of this event today is to make you feel like you can virtually visit the exhibition, whether you're too far away to visit or can't visit because of restrictions. It's a fantastic, fantastic show that we're really happy to have up with our partner gallery. And I'm going to let Isabelle Beavers talk a little bit about the concept of the show. She's our guest curator for this exhibit. So if you want to take it away, Isabelle.
Sure, thank you, Julia. And thanks so much to everyone in the audience who's here with us today, as well as all these incredible artists. Despite everything that's been happening this year, we felt really strongly about continuing to host the exhibition in person. So we're just thrilled to be able to have these virtual ways to meet with one another, to discuss the works, and to showcase all of the incredible and prescient work that these artists have been making. So welcome, really excited to be here with everyone. I was invited by Julia to guest curate an exhibition for SciArt initiative and was really interested in the idea of artificial intelligence. I personally had been learning a lot more about not only how ubiquitous AI is in our daily lives through through our phones, through tracking, through all of these many ways that we interact with machines, machine learning, and computers that we might not be aware of. And then also starting to learn about things like neural lacing and deep fakes, and then also seeing the extreme and potentially hazardous impacts of some of these technologies. But in the open call, I was really interested in seeing how other artists were responding to these ideas and also capturing a nuance of positionalities towards AI, not having the show be too heavy in terms of techno-skeptics, and then on the other hand, not having the work be too heavy on the side of techno-evangelists, but really wanting to probe at some of the deeper questions about AI and how it impacts our ability to look at the past, how it is living with us, how are we living with it today, and then what it means for our futures. I was so excited to receive all of the submissions through the open call. Of course, you never know what's going to come through, but we had an incredible range of artists from all over the world working in many different mediums and really asking unique and special questions, I thought, about this topic. And I'll just mention a few works right now that touch on some of these points that I was really interested in. And of course, you'll hear more from the artists today in their own words. But a range of positionalities came through in this call, not only looking at artificial intelligence as an idea or its ability for us to move the labor of storage, of memory, of recall onto machines and machines that are able to do machine learning. Also thinking about GANs, generated artificial networks, and the threats that AI can pose to our own security, to the integrity of information. Many of the artists use this tactic, especially used a lot in Infodemic. A really incredible piece by Jennifer Grodecki and Derek Curry, in which they use their own algorithms. I was really interested in how Chris Combs' work allows us to interact with AI on the scale of the human body, and we interact with, in his piece, Morale is Mandatory, what feels like a friendly robot. On the other hand, I was interested in how some of the artists utilize AI technologies to imagine something that doesn't exist or something that might happen in the future, like Liliana Carver's Tarim in Aspect 2 and Samir Baumick and Juka Hadamaki's Panic Breeder. We also are able to use AI and machine learning to recontextualize our understandings of the world now and potentially of histories, like in the Recoding art piece that Gabriel Pate and Bruno Mareschi created. And finally, one of the works in this exhibition that I thought was really impressive in its breadth and depth of probing many different questions on many different levels was the Current Cam project, really looking towards the future as well, and interrogating personalized narratives and an infinite live stream. And so these are just a few moments from the show that I'm pulling out. Really, each work brings something unique and brings a really important piece of the conversation to the exhibition. So I'm really excited to hear from the artists today that are here and able to share with us, and a couple more digital engagements we'll have coming down the road. So thank you, Julia, for inviting me to be able to invite all of these artists to share with us, and I'm really excited to hear from you all now.
Thank you, Isabelle, for that wonderful intro. Yes, as Isabelle mentioned, we're having a few other virtual engagements. I will talk more about that at the end of the event. If you have questions out there for any of the artists that speak with us today, please submit them via the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will get to as many questions as possible at the end of this event that we have time for. The first artist that we're going to hear from is Chris Combs. I will let Chris introduce himself. He has 2 works in this show, so take it away, Chris.
By all means, hello, I'm Chris Combs. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and I make art about technology and its role in our lives. Most of my artworks are interactive or time-based sculptures with found objects, wood, metal, and my own circuit boards and electronics. This piece, Morale is Mandatory, uses a camera and computer to detect smiling faces and shows the number of them on a meter on its front. I made this using an off-the-shelf kit once sold by Google at Target for kids to learn about neural networks. Their AIY Vision Kit includes everything you need to recognize faces and let software decide whether they are happy faces or not. I placed this Google kit in an industrial enclosure, added some electronics and lights, and a World War II vintage bakelite meter. Then I modified Google's sample code to use the meter and lights. Facial recognition as a technology has all kinds of interesting ethical implications. This Google kit sold for impressionable young minds had no mention of those implications or discussion of whether you should be using facial recognition at all. I find this interesting as an artist, especially in the last few weeks, as Google just terminated Dr. Timnit Gebru, an in-house AI ethicist, for pointing out the ethical risks of neural network models like Google's own. I also see interesting parallels here with the idea of supervised moods. In another few years, will we be seeing automated mood recognition used as a factor in social scoring systems, like those in some Chinese regions? Could Bhutan's National Happiness Index be automated? Those are some of the questions I hope to raise with this piece. I like to cloak these sort of complex issues in a fun, approachable kind of way. So I hope that you get to get a sense for what it's like to interact with this piece. So yeah, that's all I had to say about that one. And this is my other piece in the show. This is a 448-page printed binder of it's an artifact named Naked Mueller. I took the heavily redacted Mueller report on the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and a bootleg ebook of Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs and trained a neural network from both texts. Neural networks are like puppies. You show them what you want and train them to have the desired behavior. So after this new network learned from the Mueller report and Naked Lunch, I asked it to write its own text, which it did. Full disclosure, I did write this cover page, but the rest of the text, 448 pages, is written exactly as it was by this neural network. I just laid it out as though it were a human being who'd given me this fully written text. So I laid it out in a word processor, it made a table of contents, all that good stuff. You might be wondering why I chose Naked Lunch and the Mueller report to mix together. As an artist, I don't want to paint myself into a corner too much, but some of the questions that led me to this piece were, what good does it do to release a report that is so heavily redacted that few can see the findings? And what sort of vignettes might be hidden inside those redactions? Among other things, Naked Lunch describes the actions of a totalitarian government. There's also a censorship tie-in. It was censored at scale by the US federal government. It went to the Supreme Court. A friend suggested the matching of these two texts and I loved it. So with this piece, I hope to ask a few questions. What role will human authors have in an industry that could be swamped by neural networks generating language like GPT-3? We've seen the beginnings of this with long-tail products generated algorithmically on Amazon and elsewhere. And I'm wondering how long it will be before those less versed in AI's follies begin to leave judicial or legal decision-making to a well-trained model that was raised right? So those are some of the sort of chilling questions that I hope to evoke with this piece. I really appreciate having this opportunity, and you can find more of my work at chriscombs.net.
Thank you so much, Chris. Fascinating food for thought, to say the least. Next up, we have the Currents team. So I know there are a few of you here, which I'm so thrilled about. I'll let you take it away, however you want to handle this, whether you all talk.
Right on. Cool, thank you. I guess I'll introduce everyone. Hi, we're the Current team, and we're an international and interdisciplinary team that came together during Strelka, the New Normal program in 2019. And we're all tuning from different parts of the world, so I'll say hi first. I'm Ellie Jotiva, and I'm a Bulgarian intermedia artist and researcher working at the intersection of art and science, and I'm joining you from Sofia.
Hi, I'm Provice from Hong Kong, and I'm joining from Hong Kong. Sorry, I'm an architect.
My name is Artyom Knyvskih, and I'm a data scientist, and I'm joining from Moscow.
Hi, I'm Yanzi, and I'm also from Moscow, and I'm specialized in visual effects, 3D graphics, animation, and all this. All the tools needed for our future world to construct.
Yeah, so Current came out as a speculation on the future of broadcasting cinema, and we were thinking about the future being like 5 years in the future in 2019. But really, after this year of pandemic, it seems like the future is already here, and we're living in it. The core ideas that we explore in this project are infinite live stream, personalization, volumetric cinema, and AI optimization or deepfakes. And each of us kind of worked on different sections and parts of both the research project and the film.
Yeah, so basically because we're all from different professional and cultural backgrounds, so we all are naturally concerned about very different issues around the world. So the film is kind of like an integration between an interdisciplinary knowledge coming from all of us, and also issues that we're concerned about. So for instance, I'm an architect, so I'm naturally concerned about how these kind of technology impacts our built environment. And Artyom and Yancy.
Yeah, as a data scientist, I'm very interested in how machines can see the world. So I'm really interested in both how we can use autonomous vehicles or CCTV cameras in the city to be a part of broadcasting cinema. And also I'm interested in how we can analyze these video streams and gather data from here, or adjust this data to be more personalized using neural networks. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why my camera isn't working. And I'm interested in, when we were making Current, I was interested in this like shifting paradigm from 2D environment to 3D environment, like 2D interface to 3D environment, because I think we're moving towards this three-dimensional worlds because it's like VR and all the technologies are ready for the construction of this, I don't know, simulation playground where everybody can finally meet each other without without being afraid of COVID and other I know threats from the environment. And our film Current is made as one big long shot for 13 minutes, and we made this because like to show the differences between like 2D film, where you can make like straight cuts between shots, like montage cuts, you know. And when you move into virtual reality, this montage cuts is not working because it's like the whole world around you, like changes as a glitch if you try to switch all the environment around you. So that's why it's a constant flow, navigatable constant flow. And we were trying to represent this in our 2D video, but we're waiting for technologies to be more available to finally enjoy this new world.
Yeah, well, one cool thing about GANs is that they're starting to shift into a three-dimensional space now, and I think that's something that we are speculating on. What would that look like in the very near future or now, when we are able to combine multiple live streams in a volumetric space that are optimized by the GAN's ability to give you what you want to see.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I think we're interested in, as my colleagues was saying, the volumetric cinema, what actually enables us to kind of estimate scene descriptions and perhaps what's behind the object. So we're not only seeing what's on the surface of an image. And also we're interested in a sort of automated cinema where machines are comparing the efficiencies amongst each other and then creating, reconstructing events for us that we can authenticate truth.
And for those who can't visit the exhibit in person, is there a way for us to view this online?
Yes, you can check out the work, the film and the research at current.cam. And you can also explore our new 3D gallery, which we launched for this show, and meet your friends in there and have a chat.
Awesome. Well, you should all definitely do that, all audience members out there.
Thank you.
Again, a lot of the work in the show is time-based, and so we hope that you choose to engage with these artists directly through their websites if you're not able to see the show in person. Next up is Ian Heisters. I will let you take it away, Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian. I'm in California, and my background is as a dancer and a choreographer. And I've been working with technology throughout my career and applying it to an improvisation-based dance practice. And for this series, Gestures, I'm looking at how physical gesture is an encoding of history, and how structures of power through time are made evident in everyday interactions. And then using algorithms as kind of an unreliable decoder of these stories. So there's this kind of play, this dissonance between the performances of the dancers and the viewer and the algorithm that both offers insights into the dancers' experiences and also like kind of confounds the viewer and offers some new like possibilities for like this. I have this sense of a nostalgia for you know, a kind of an alternate present that with a different relationship between the technology and our lives and history. So the movements in this piece are all based on a workshopping process from Gabriel and Sherwood's lives, and they're based on their real experiences of how history is evidenced in everyday interactions. And in this piece in particular that was selected for the show, I was fascinated, and we all were when we actually went back and watched the final product. There's a kind of tenderness that comes through in this experience, and it was surprising because the workshopping process was very much consumed with like discussion of like politics and history, and philosophy, and I think some of the tenderness that came through this in this piece exposes the fundamentally intimate nature of how technology and history are acting on our bodies and our relationships with one another that manages to come through in this video. That's all I have to say about this one.
And I will ask again, is there a way for us to see this video online anywhere?
The video itself is of indefinite duration, so there's nowhere you can see it in its full presence online. But there are excerpts if you go to my website, Heisters, HEISTERS.studio.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, artists, as you wrap up, you can always type in your website into the chat to everybody so that the audience members have ready access. And any audience members out there, if there's an artist who piques your interest today, but you forgot to write down their name or you somehow didn't quite get all the info you wanted, please reach out to me and I can connect you, direct you to the right goal. Okay, thank you so much, Ian. Next up is Liliana Carver.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am a Uruguayan visual artist, currently based in New York. And my work investigates how the virtual redefines the real world. In this particular work, it's called Terram Aspecto. I am very interested in the conceptions and legacies of knowledge and sort of like the colonial history that of maps that it kinds of like it's getting recycled into new ways to define the world. So for this project, I recreate as satellite photography maps of islands that never existed. These are called phantom islands. These are bodies of land that appear for many years in maps, but never existed. And using a machine learning algorithm that I trained with images from Google Earth, I recreate these images as satellite photography. And for me, what is interesting about these places that exist between reality and fiction that existed in the collective consciousness, but they were never existing in geography, is that some of them are more famous, like the mythological Atlantis, but some of them are more modest, like Jupiter Reef, an archipelago that it was proven to have never existed just in 2015. That is 10 years after Google Earth was launched and 15 years after the first available satellite photography map as in a web platform. So I am interested in how Google recycles information from older maps, also how the politics embedded in these algorithms. And for me, the most interesting question is, why should we have a system that contains the whole information of the world in a geographic aspect? And if any institutions should be in charge of this task, being such a contested matter. Not only the existence of tiny islands that change the overall economic zones in the waters of countries, but also you have political definitions and that are in places that are contested by many nations, and who gets to define as a sole voice what is true and what is real. I invite you also to see the entire series and other works at lilianacarver.com.
Thank you so much, Liliana. Next up, we have Eric Anderson. I'm actually going to try to play a bit of this video. Maybe it will work.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you very much for having me and for hosting the conversation and the work. Do you want me to wait until you have it set up to play, or just go right on into it?
I'm going to click play and we'll see what happens.
Okay. Yeah, so really, Feeding on Infinity, kind of think through the decline of our planet's biodiversity juxtaposed with Big Pharma's practice of creating and then putting patents on novel life forms and bioorganisms, and wondering what would it look like if there was like an open source platform where anybody, where communities could create their own synthetic life forms, and then under the umbrella of a shared ownership or something of that nature, which could go in a few directions. One of my favorite topics lately to think about is data poisoning, and you know, putting too much wrong data out there in the world or something. And but so for the process of all my work typically starts twofold, where I'll start with a list of questions that I keep with me, kind of a nervous system that I try to always ask the work to keep myself in check and to think differently about it. It could be, you know, what is this thing's center? What is the opposite of it? What does it take attention away from? And what are its possible futures? What will fail to endure over time? And so once I've really thought through some of these questions, and obviously not come up with answers, but maybe just different questions or more precise questions, I look at what tools are out there in the world that are available, typically with no consideration of if I understand those tools at the time, which sometimes I regret later once I start to have to make the thing. But really look what's out there to help me better pose those questions for different communities and different ways to create conversations around the topics. And so Feeding on Infinity really leaned into, of course, machine learning, chaining together multiple GANs and starting with zero content on my end and creating a system that was able to just create infinite synthetic counterfeit organisms. And going forward, I'm curious of what a more interactive version would look like that would be out in the communities where people can co-create different organisms, share them, you know, patent them or something. So really, I'm going to continue to explore that with this. And there is more on my site, howzero.com. So it's HOWZERO.com. I've started to put up some videos and stuff, and I'll just continue to populate that. And yeah, I think I ran through that too quickly because now I'm realizing I will yield my time because I'm actually really interested in hearing about the other artists' work as well.
No worries. Thank you so much, Eric. And yes, I've been typing in the websites as they come along, and we'll be sure to get everyone's info in there. Next up, we have a collaborative work by Lane, Retmer, and Isabelle Beavers, our curator. So I will let Isabelle come back on stage.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, and I'll speak briefly on behalf of Lane Retmer and I, who is my curator, my collaborator for this work. We created this piece during a residency in Iceland, and actually at the time, oh gosh, stop, that was my alarm. At the time, we were really moving through a very intuitive process on the landscape of recording a lot of video footage. And after we came back and turned that video footage into other highly edited narrative pieces, but we were really interested in this storage of data that we had, sort of all of the B-roll footage that we took during this experience and what the life of that would be, even if it wasn't pulled into the pieces that we edited, and how all of that data was a stand-in for these really real and visceral memories at the time. We wanted a way to sort of represent and I think Liliana used the word phantom in terms of talking about these islands, which I really like, but sort of the phantom memories and the experiences in this archive that was there, but also inaccessible at the same time. And so we were really thinking about the trend towards pushing the labor of storage and recall of memories off onto machines and to computers, and how that ends up shifting the meaning of our memories. So for this piece, we were really juxtaposing in a really direct way the very embodied physical and visceral experience of being on a landscape and having the soft memory of being in that space, and then what happens to those memories when they're stored as data, and how do we access those later, and how does that process of storage and recall inevitably shift the meaning of those memories. So this is a piece made out of acrylic and USBs that have storage of all of our B-roll footage on it. On the right side of the sculpture, there is an observation, sort of a subjective reflection of our time on the landscape. And these coordinates here are representative of the site of the video that we were shooting that day. And there originally was a series of 4 of these sculptures at varying heights to sort of relate to the elevation of the landscape which we were on. So we were really excited to include these in the exhibition as well, and in a bit more of an abstract and poetic way, think about the relationships between humans, machines, and memory.
Thank you, Isabelle. Okay, next up we have the Mareshi and Perrier team. I'll let you take it away, Gabriel.
Hi everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Isabelle, for not only your work, but for the creation of this exhibit. So my name is Gabriel Pate. I'm a PhD fellow here at Aarhus University in Denmark, and this work was co-directed with the artist and researcher Bruno Moreschi. It's really based on our research. So in a couple of years ago, I sent to Bruno an email that had this exact image that you see here on my background, trying to like show you. It's the Deschamps fountain, and it's being read by Google as a plumbing fixture and product design. And so we were really curious about how the AI was reading those artworks, and we really came up to it somewhat of a coincidence. I was trying to understand those systems, but we didn't think about using artworks. But that led to this process, and Bruno came and he did a research residency at the Van Abbe Museum in the Netherlands. And what we did was we used those commercial AI systems to read the artworks, the images of the artworks from the museum, the Van Abbe Museum. And those results, we think they're really interesting because they do 2 things that we find really useful. The first of them is trying to give another way of looking at the art word. It's a word that is usually very hierarchical in the way that we are told that we should understand art. It's very often, how the artist sees his own work or how the curator sees the work of the artist. But we're trying to think about other ways that the artwork can be understood. What if we see Duchamp's fountain as a plumbing fixture? What happens then? And on the other hand, trying to review some of those processes and biases and questions that those algorithmic systems have in them, right? So we're really influenced by, among many things, John Berger's work, when he says, for example, that the process of seeing paintings or anything else is less spontaneous than we tend to believe, that a large part of seeing depends upon habits and conventions, right? So what are the habits and conventions of the machine? Right, John Berger was speaking about this in relation to people, but this also happens with the machine, And this leads us to speculate a bit of how this AI gaze is looking at the artworks, but also trying to understand some of the inherent fallibilities and some of the inherent problems that come with using machines to try to understand the word in their own way. We're also very inspired by Oblique Strategies by Brian Eno and his colleague, where they have one of the cards that says, honor thy error as a hidden intention. So it's really about looking at those artworks through those CVs, but looking at the moments where it doesn't see the things that we as humans expect to see. So for example, when it looks at an artwork as a cushion, right? Or as a close-up of a computer. What is it that it's seen there that reminds it of those things? And then in the end, just to tie it back, we try to understand some of the lower layers of the AI creation that is not very often discussed in society, which is the fact that, you know, those AIs, they have to be created by humans, and they have to be given a bunch of training data, not even a bunch, like a lot of training data that needs to be labeled by humans. And the humans that are doing this work are the underpaid and somewhat marginalized within those systems. Amazon Mechanical Turkers that created some of those data sets of images. And so we talk a bit about the way that those people that create the data that goes into the AIs see those works, those same works that were looked at by the AIs. And responding to the question, I think Julia is going to ask next. The work is not available to watch online just yet. We're right now showing it in different galleries and some film festivals as well. So we're just this past week, we were at the Dart Festival in Barcelona. So we're still in that moment where we can't make it freely accessible online, but we hope to have it online in the beginning of next year, hopefully. But for now, it's going to be running around in those different festivals and galleries. Thank
Great, thank you so much, Gabriel. So yeah, if you want to stay up to date on when you can view this film online, join his mailing list, go to the website, stay up to date. Our next couple of artists could not join us today, unfortunately, so we're going to zoom through these next pieces. The Gomek and Hautamaki team, they are fantastic, but couldn't be here today. Next up is Jennifer Grudecki and Derek Curry.
Hi, thanks for having us. It's been amazing to see everyone else's work and hear people talk about it. And we're just excited to be here. So I'm Jennifer Grudecki. I'm a media artist and theorist.
And I'm Derek Curry. I'm also a media artist and theorist.
And we're based in Boston.
Based in Boston.
Yeah, and so Infodemic is a neural network generated video that questions the mediated narratives that have been created about the coronavirus by influencers, celebrities, politicians, and social media algorithms. And we used a conditional GAN to create talking heads of these different influencers, and they're speaking the words of experts about the coronavirus. And that includes medical experts, journalists, and they are, in some ways, they're correcting some of the false narratives that they put out, and then in other ways, they're actually explaining some of the processes by which this misinformation is created and promoted on social media.
So this is an outgrowth of both of our artistic and academic research. We started working with algorithms when we started to replicate predictive policing algorithms and stock trading algorithms as artworks in an effort to show people how, not only how they work to a certain extent, but the types of mistakes they make. Mm-hmm. So we're mostly interested in systems that create like a large power structure around them. And we've always been a little bit dissatisfied with the limitations of, I guess, inherent in trying to explain how these algorithms work to people, because to a certain extent, it normalizes it. When we were dealing with predictive policing algorithms, we would let people surveil themselves, so they knew the content of what they were, posting online, and so they could, see the mistakes the algorithms made. But so when we made this project, we used a conditional generative adversarial network, like Jennifer said, but which is used in deepfakes, but deepfakes are also touched up afterwards. So they'll use the GAN to create the facial features of the new speaker, and then they will place that over top of an existing video, and then use editing software like After Effects or something like that to smooth over all the rough edges. And we didn't do that. We let the GAN generate the entire image, including the background, which when you watch the video, you see that sometimes when the speaker moves, the background will move with it, and there'll be a lot of glitches. And also what we did was we didn't train it on one single speaker at a time. We took multiple talking heads and put them into the corpus of images that we trained it on. So this is actually an amalgam of 20 or so different neural networks generating people from a combination of corpora.
Yeah, and we didn't want to try to fool people into believing that this was real, because of course we're raising questions about the veracity of the media that people are consuming and producing. But we also liked the way that when we made these combined corpora, because typically in deepfakes it'll be one person, and it's, you know, you try to recreate them as accurately as possible, but we would put multiple people into each corpora, and then it mutates from one person into another, much like the virus mutates.
So we're really trying to reveal like the constructed nature of both the video created from generative networks, but also the constructed nature of claims in the media in general.
Mm-hmm.
Tie those two together.
Yeah, and
Wonderful.
another thing.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
The other, you know, doing this was really a process of artistic research, and in that process, I discovered that there really was this, you know, you could call it a data void. There was this lack of scientific information. So in this context of scientific uncertainty, these false narratives were being promoted, and it was also partially because of the targeted advertising business models of the social media companies that really helped to promote these false narratives.
So if you'd like to see a bit of this piece and hear more about it, audience members out there, we are having an event with Derek and Jennifer next week on December 15th at noon on Zoom. I am sharing the Eventbrite link so you can register. But yes, fascinating work. None of these artists here have enough time to really delve into, you know, the real complexities of their work, but I'm sure that piqued your interest, at least as it has piqued mine. So thank you for sharing. Next up, we have Jana Adner.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jana, and I am a painter. I actually have a background in technology writing. I wrote a social critique on humanoid robotics around 2016. And I've also, had that sort of understanding of AI, the implications, and then recently with deep fakes in relation to the pandemic and misinformation, I was starting to sort of think, obviously, like all of us, right, we all know in this group, the sort of outcomes for disinformation and deep fakes can be sort of a concern in a sort of democratic way, and how people are informed. So this painting for me was almost like it was sort of different than the work I've done in the past. I usually am an abstract artist, and I tend to work with refraction gradients, and they're usually bright, and I'm sort of loosely discussing, like what I see in VR and like the abstract pixelation in VR. But for this piece, just in relation to everything happening this year, I sort of decided to create something that isn't quite a deep fake in the sense that, yeah, we're questioning the veracity of the medium, like it clearly shows you it's a painting, right? But it did make me think back to, well, before, the daguerreotype, the original deep fake, I guess sort of was a painting in a way, but with Van Eyck. So that was one thought I had. But yeah, so it's pretty much just sort of the questioning around, the biggest concern for me with disinformation is how it adds to the issues we already have, right, with sort of potentially an uninformed public. And so I created this piece, which is sort of like a nightmare or fever dream of like, the White House and like a Southern Gothic, almost in like a Faulknerian state of decay. You've got like the bougainvillea, like the vines growing through it. And then around it, there's sort of these like masked figures, like sort of, what are they, the internet trolls or something, sort of taking over, the White House. And then you see, a little bit on the left, you can see a lower corner, there's actually an image of Melania in the lower corner, you can sort of see there. And then in the lower right corner, there's also Donald Trump, and he's in a jester's hat. And at the same time, though, the image isn't as straight as it could be, because this itself is just sort of like a prop. There's little bits of sort of poles holding up the White House itself, right? So it's really just a prop. So it's really just potentially an empty threat, an empty terror, just a bad dream. But I thought this was a kind of a hypothetical outcome that I saw sort of on the horizon a few years ago. So I decided to just sort of tee it up a little bit and focus on it and just be as sort of obvious as I could there. So yeah, that's pretty much it with it. But you know, I think the thing that I am always continuing to be the most concerned about is how these technologies affect people in their everyday lives. And even like, you know, you'll hear a piece of information from a family member and just be like, that's not right. That's not what I heard about, you know, something basic to science even. I think it's actually just becoming such an interesting sort of polarizing climate today in society. And it's something that, you know, I've spent a lot of time, you know, wondering about and what that means. So for our future, yeah, in society. So.
Thank you, Jana. I'm sure you're not the only one out there who's been wondering a lot about
that.
Next up, we have Heather Lowe.
Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. I'm here near Chinatown at Keystone Art Space. This project actually began for me about 6 years ago at my apartment. We have these little leaflets that come in the mail, and there are these coupons that can you see the coupons? That you can tear out, and they're for missing people. And this friend of mine came up behind me and he said, you know, if your loved ones, you know, really cared about you, would they want you to look like this 10 years from now? And it cracked me up. I mean, I laughed, but I started looking at these little faces. I mean, most of them end up in the trash can, and they just peek out from the trash can, you know. So I just started tearing them out, and I got sort of obsessive about it. I collected hundreds and hundreds of these things, and the idea was I decided to make this huge installation, and luckily I got to do it at the brewery projects, where I filled a closet of these faces, and I inserted lenticular pieces in all of the coupons. So I found some friends of mine that allowed me to steal their faces off of the internet, and then I would use lenticulars to morph their faces or turn them into something. So there's some whimsy in this, but also I was trying to go for more of an empathetic kind of thing, where you'd really want to look at these people, because, you know, usually people just ignore this stuff. And so I just wanted it in their face, you know, no pun intended. So then after I did the smaller pieces, the walls were lined with it. What I noticed, people weren't reading the literature that was on the coupon, and that was really important to me. I wanted their name to be in there, and I wanted to sort of play with their name. One of my friends is a painter, Douglas. Let's see if I can put this up to them. And I found this AI face that looked sort of like Douglas Fairbanks. So I changed his name around, and I just played with these ideas and identities. When I would do I had files and files and files of all these faces, and I would try to match the face with some twin out there in the universe. And then I came across all these AI faces, and I went, because I can just go into more of a surreal environment. And so I just started using all the AI faces and changing them into things like Jasmine became almost a map. When you see it in the lenticular, it moves into a map-like object. And Politico was about, you know, this guy, he turns into almost like a Pinocchio character. And so, I mean, I'm having fun with it, but I also want people to think about their inner life. You know, you have this inner life, and there's this outer socio structure that you are molded into. You know, I mean, this happens without all of the artificial intelligence stuff. You are put into this culture And maybe, you know, maybe you don't want to go there. So I ran into a girl that was a runaway, and she was having a really hard time in LA, and she wanted to use my cell phone, so I let her use my cell phone. And later I saw her when I saw her just walking down the street, and I realized I have the number in my phone that she called because she looked like she was in trouble. And I get on the phone with her mother, and her mother was somewhat of a nutcase. I mean, she was so concerned about her responsibility with the child that she was not aware what the child was really about. And so I understood why this girl ran away. And, you know, she looked okay. You know, she was able to live on the street pretty well, I guess. But it made me realize a lot of things about why people leave their where they are at the moment. You know, they're just moving into something else. So this is all about transformation, basically. But I was really trying to open it up to a lot of different interpretations on who we are and how we fit into things. It you know, to be aware of that.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing, Heather.
Yes.
And last but certainly not least, we have the work of Henry Brown.
Hi, everybody. Thanks also for including my work, and it's been great to get a little bit more in depth with all the other pieces and artists. And thanks everybody for coming to check this out. My name is Henry Brown. I'm a printmaker and a print publisher in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm here in my print shop where it's also a little bit chilly. But so these two prints here are from the HUD series Heads Up Display, which is a term for the, you know, within a first person video game, kind of all of the information that's in front of you about your character. So these images are screenshots from different RPG, you know, first person role playing games, really, you know, high fantasy, epic landscape video games that are then, you know, so it's a screenshot that is then converted into a photopolymer etching plate. So it's printed just like a copper plate etching. And kind of presented in a really classic way with the, you know, on the one case, the gold foil on the matte edge and the lovely frames. So kind of what the work is about for me is not just comparing these sweeping fantasy video games sort of to traditional landscape techniques and how the earth itself and landscapes have been presented throughout the history of painting and printmaking. But also to just kind of create a space where the viewer can enter in, but then also start to notice things that are off, you know, like those leaves kind of look really sharp, or that branch is really sharp, and those, you know, no trees really grow in this pattern or something. That hill is really sharp as well. So they sort of start to see the cracks in the image. Yeah, and I guess I'd like that not to just be kind of a commentary on how we see the, you know, how we see the history of painting and the history of images, but also to kind of point back at the viewer and say, just, you know, how much of your world is virtual, whether it's what you see on the computer or just the world we all construct around ourselves. There's a sort of a virtual reality element to that at all times. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to. That is all that we have for today for our artist presenters. Unfortunately, as usual, we're running short on time and short on questions, but audience members out there who did submit questions or would like to, please send them to me in an email, info@sireinitiative.org. and I'll be happy to connect you with the artists that you're interested in chatting more with. I'm sure they'd be happy to chat more with you about their work. So the Deepfake exhibition in person is open until January 5th by private appointment. So if you're interested in visiting the exhibit, please reach out to me and I will connect you with Super Collider Gallery, or you can reach them directly on their website. And I hope you get a chance to visit in person, but if not, I hope that you got a good idea of what the show is about and what its aims were today, and the wonderful, wonderful work that is included from artists around the world. And lastly, SciArt, like every nonprofit right now, is in the middle of a fundraising month. So if you like the programs that we run, like this virtual program here, our exhibitions, we have a residency program, we have other monthly events, we have a publication as well, please consider making a donation. I will share the donation link in the chat. And if you donate, all donations are tax deductible. And if you donate $50 or more, you'll receive this lovely custom tote bag, which includes unique artwork by one of our very own team members. So again, thank you so much to all of the artists who shared today. Thank you, Isabelle, for curating this wonderful exhibition. Thank you, Super Collider Gallery, for hosting us and being an amazing partner. And thanks to our audience members for tuning in.
Thank you everyone for coming. One last plug I'll make is that there were a few artists who were not able to be here today, and so we didn't see their work through this format, but we have an exhibition catalog that will be emerging probably right after the holidays, here in the States at least, that will feature the work by each artist in the exhibition. That will be available digitally, so we'll be sure to let you know, keep updated on the SciArt and Super Collider channels for that. But if you would like another opportunity to view and experience the work, that will be coming soon.
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that, Isabelle. We'll definitely include that in an email in the new year. So something to look forward to. So, all right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.